Welcome back to Novas and Friends. Before we start, let's show you what we did off camera. I finished welding and grinding the floor pan piece that we tacked in place in the previous video. Link to that will be at the end of the video. Then I ground and welded the inside to a point that you would not feel it underneath the carpet. And for the outside, we grounded flush so we could do body work over the firewall. If you're new at welding like me and would like to see more welding and grinding, leave a comment below. Anyways, let's get into the video. We have a few surprises for a freshly repaired floor pan piece. Now that we've talked about what we've done off camera, let's show you what we're doing today. And that is taking this massive transmission and putting it in this tiny car. But before we do that, we need to attach this transmission to a bare small block. We need to do this because we need to weld the transmission crossmember mounts and other things to help hold it in its proper place. And we can't do that without having the engine mounted in place. Now we aren't using the motor that will be powering the car later, just a nice empty 010 casting block. This will make moving the assembly easier. Before we assemble these parts, let's go over them. First is the empty block. There's nothing super special about it, but it's just a stronger casting. Next is the Chevy 2 specific bell housing that attaches to it. It has a throwout bearing release fork that is part of the clutch linkage assembly. Now onto the transmission. It is an LT1 Camaro 6-speed manual Borg & Warner T56 that my father built with the 2-stage billet steel synchronizer keys, steel 3 to 4 shift fork, bronze shifter fork pads, center shifter position, and a bunch of other new goodies. It also has the highly sought after 50% overdrive 6th gear that helps out with those long distance cruises. But you may say, a T56 does not naturally fit this bell housing, and that's where this billet steel adapter plate comes in. It will adapt a bolt pattern of a T56 to the factory bell housing. It has two hole patterns, one that mounts it vertical and another that gives it a slight tilt for some cars or stall preferences. We will be using the holes that mount it vertical. Now with that said, let's assemble it. There are multiple places to start, but we are going to start with attaching the clutch fork to the inside of the bell housing. It just pops into the pivot ball with the end sticking out so you can attach it to the rest of the clutch linkage. Now with that attached, we can bolt the adapter to the bell housing. This billet steel adapter is CNC made using a Muncie input shaft bearing retainer. The retainer aligns to the factory bell housing, but can also be used to upgrade to a hydraulic throwout bearing later. The adapter bolts on with these tapered head Allen bolts. With the assembly complete, we can carefully align the input shaft and locating pins on the T56 to the billet steel adapter and install the 8 bolts. Since this is only a mock-up, we are going to skip the thread locker. We are going to install our V8 frame mounts. It is important to remember that on the factory-designed 1962 through 1967 Nova, the drivetrain is shifted to the passenger side. This allows more space and room in the steering box on these cars. That said, the longer frame mounts go on the driver's side of the car. Now we can bolt the massive transmission to the bare block. It attaches with 6 bolts and aligns with these pins. Now with all that strapped up and ready, we are going to install the subframe crossmember and put some jack stands under the subframe. Cool! Now we can remove the radiator support since the factory rivets are no longer in place. This is going to make our life easier and prevent unnecessary damage. Now we're prepped, it's time for us to lift the engine transmission assembly into place. First we placed it about where it should be front to rear. Then Dad started raising the transmission into place. All was going well until we encountered a huge problem. Alright guys, we're starting to get kind of close up here, but we've encountered a problem on the bottom. And that is that this area and many other areas are starting to get really close to hitting. So we've talked about it for a few minutes and we've decided that we're going to have to cut out a big section of the floor. We thought earlier that we would just have to do a little area for the shifter, but now it's turned out that we're going to just have to cut a massive hole in the floor. So we're going to mark it out and show you where we're at then. Done! Alright guys, thanks for watching. I guess the next episode's about fixing this hole we just cut in the floor. So we'll see you then.
Oh, there's no hole.
Nah, there's no hole anymore. Now. Yep.